Awesome, good morning. Thank you guys for coming. I know we're sort of the last step between you guys and wrapping up this conference, so we appreciate you being here today. My name is Erin Simon, and today we're going to talk to you about the pearls and pitfalls for building an emergency medicine research program. We're going to go around real quick and just let our speakers introduce themselves. I'll go ahead and start. I'm Erin Simon. I am professor of emergency medicine through Northeast Ohio Medical University. I am vice chair of research for Cleveland Clinic Emergency Services, and I also run our research program for Akron General for our residency through Cleveland Clinic.
Hi, I'm Sarah Heinert. I am an assistant professor and research director at Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School in New Brunswick, New Jersey.
Hi all, I'm Michael Gottlieb. I'm a professor of EM, vice chair of research, and also division director at Rush in Chicago.
Hi everyone, I'm Roz King. I am the chief of research for emergency medicine at the University of Vermont.
James Paxton, director of clinical research at Wayne State University, Detroit.
And these are our disclosures. And so we'll go through our learning objectives for you guys. By the conclusion of the session, we want you to be able to recognize key strategies to engage your faculty, residents, and students in research. We want to explain how to build a research program regardless of your infrastructure and practice setting. We want to identify ways to seek funding, collaborate, and disseminate research findings. And we'll give you 7 tips for building a successful emergency medicine research program. So these are some of the top 7 considerations when building an emergency medicine program, and we'll touch on each of these throughout our discussion today. Sarah's going to go ahead and get started.
So a year or two ago, the Research Directors Interest Group laid out a survey because we wanted to figure out, what do research directors do? What do they look like? What is a research director? So these are some of the findings from our survey. Take it with a bit of a grain of salt because we had an N of 29 people. But at least it's a starting point. And so of the people who actually completed the survey, most were female and most were white. Most people had an MD or DO or MD/CM degree. And the majority had a master's degree, with about a quarter having a PhD. And so when we think about what are a research director's roles, we also wanted to know this. So this graph shows the most common roles of a research director, with the most common being collaboration with researchers, research directors working on their own grants, and then research directors working on resident and faculty research, with mentorship of faculty also being a common role, mentorship of faculty and mentorship of trainees. So a lot of these research directors are providing mentorship as well to both their residents and their faculty. We also wanted to know how a research director is supported. So this is really meant to be helpful to different departments who are starting this or figuring out how to support a research director. We asked the survey participants about their own support. And so about half of people had direct stipend. Most people had hours buy down. The majority of respondents were funded by their department or med school or through university funding. And those who were funded through grants, there were few who were partially or solely funded. The majority had less than a quarter FTE for the position, with the average being about a quarter. We also asked about what support do they get from other people, and about a quarter of people had no non-faculty research support staff, so they were kind of doing it on their own. At the same time, about a third had 4 or more FTEs, so there's a lot of variability in how much non-faculty research support staff the research directors have. And of these support staff, about a third have a research coordinator, 20% have a biostatistician, and so these were the most common support staff that participants reported.
Okay. So I think one of the problems that I'm James Paxton, sorry, Wayne State University, and thanks. So one of the problems that we can have sometimes is the culture, right, of a department. And we're talking today about how to develop a good research department, research division. And I think one of the problems that people have is, do we really want to do that? You know, does the boss really want this? Is it something that's going to work? And I think lack of buy-in from the chair, if most of us work in an academic department with a chair, is going to be a problem if you don't have alignment with the mission of the department and your research mission. So I think the first step towards trying anything to develop a research department, research division, or research program is making sure you're on the same page with the rest of your team, right? So if the chair is not on your team, then you don't have a team. You have to also, in addition to that, have a culture of scholarly activity that values scholarly activity. I think that's an important component here as well if you want to be successful. You're going to need a lot of help, a lot of support, a lot of resources. And in order to mobilize all of that, you're going to need other people to help you with that. So developing a culture that appreciates the work you're doing is an important component as well, and maybe even preliminary to being successful. Resources for otherwise unfundable projects is something that is going to be important, right? So a lot of what we're doing in the beginning when we're starting a program is we're working on projects that are important to the faculty, the people that are doing the work, but they may not be important to funders, people who are paying for the work, right? So you need to have and identify what resources may exist. Sometimes there are zero resources within your department. That does not, however, mean there are zero resources at your institution, right? So there may be things on a larger scale if you're affiliated with a university or have other funders that are affiliated with you that you may be able to tap for some of these projects. So identify those resources early and then sometimes find projects that fit the resources you have as opposed to developing a project and then going to look for the resources that you need. Research imperatives need to be top-down. This goes back to having buy-in from the chair or other leaders in your department, but I think it's important to remember that. Individuals have ideas, but in order for the ideas to materialize into projects, they need support from the people who are making decisions in the department. So, and I think it's important to have meetings and discuss ideas and a plan to go forward. And one of the things that I've learned talking to people who've started research divisions or who are research directors is they tend to be very ambitious, aggressive, like let's get this done type of people, right? They may not see the value, maybe some of us may not see the value of having a meeting or frequent meetings with people to keep everybody on the same page, but I assure you it's an important part of getting all of this done. And then each of your faculty members, each of the people who is doing research or activities, projects in your department, is going to have specific things that are going to motivate them. And for some people that might be money, for some people that might be time, for some people that might just be relationships, you know? Identify what are those things with the individual faculty members that are going to motivate them. And the flip side of that is, what are the things that might serve as whips if you have to use a whip? Always better to use a carrot than a whip, but if you need a whip, what would be the whip that you could use with a person? So a lot of times that is a financial thing, and you can incorporate those into your culture as well as things that you can use to recognize achievements and accomplishments and get people motivated to do the work. So hand it off to Erin.
So an important thing as you're trying to build your research program is you want to ensure that you're matching your faculty strengths with the opportunities that exist. A lot of times we're all busy, right? We're being pulled in multiple different directions. A lot of things that we're doing within our own hospital are things that we're volunteering our time for. So sitting on committees, helping with quality improvement projects. But oftentimes there's opportunities within those to create research, to study outcomes for things that we're doing. Those are kind of low-hanging fruit for your faculty that aren't really experienced in research, ways to get them engaged. So you want to try to align the things that they're doing within the hospital as part of their duties as physicians with their area of research interest. So if someone is interested in sepsis, then they should probably sit on the sepsis committee, and then they're going to connect with other people from other departments that are also working on this, and it's just going to align opportunities for them within their own hospital system. And the same thing for things being done outside of your department. So you want to collaborate with other people interested in in similar topics, but you also want to make sure that they're reaching outside of their own network, and you're creating opportunities as well for that. You want to make sure that you're providing frequent updates. As James touched on, communication is key. People want to know what they're doing is valued. They want to know that it's important and that it matters to your department. And so you want to make sure that you're clear about what they need to do to reach those goals. And also, once they do reach those goals, you want to celebrate them and make sure that everyone's aware. And some of those ways that you can do that are sending out publication links when you're faculty. For us specifically, our residency coordinator, she creates a research news page. And every time someone gets a publication, she has the direct link to the publication. It celebrates who the authors or co-authors within the department are. And it's just a nice simplified way to send it out, and people can click on the link and read what scholarly activity we're putting out within our department. So continuing to touch on providing opportunities, you also want to make sure you're providing education on research skills. And that doesn't always have to fall on you as an individual. Sometimes when people are just getting started in research, they just really don't even know where to begin. Maybe they didn't learn how to do a good literature or background search on their specific topic. So you want to tie them to your librarian within your hospital or your medical school and help them to understand those beginning steps. You want to make sure you're providing education on research skills. So if you do happen to have other faculty that you work with, maybe a PhD or a biostatistician, you can have them sit down and meet with them on the front end. So each of these individual tasks don't feel so overwhelming, and also so that you're not trying to do everything for everyone. You want to kind of spread out the resources that you do have available to you and utilize those wisely, and also just make sure that your department knows that those are available to them, because oftentimes it's helpful if they know they have someone they can come to ask questions that they're unsure of. You want to make sure you're inviting learners, so people that are interested in research, to your departmental research meetings. If you have a monthly meeting or a quarterly meeting, invite your medical students that are engaged, invite your residents that have identified themselves as really having a particular interest in research, and make sure that they're aware of what's going on within the department and they hear those conversations. And then finally, as you're providing those opportunities, we touched on this a little bit, but you kind of want to lower the activation energy required to get involved. I think a lot of reasons why especially junior faculty don't engage in research is there's a little bit of fear there. They don't feel like maybe they have enough expertise, or they don't feel like they have the skill set that's needed to do research. So make sure that you're providing them the support that they need. You know that you'll help walk them through every step of the way, that it's not super overwhelming. Create things like templates and other things that you can provide them for IRB protocols so they can see examples of things, and kind of lower that energy so they don't feel so overwhelmed. Roz?
Yeah, so looking at the data that show that so few people have research support and stuff, we thought it'd be helpful to talk about how to build that team. And I think there's a few different ways that you can do it. Gosh, that light is really blinding every time. A few different ways that you can build a team. And so one of them is the Research Associate Program. We've had a lot of success with that where we are. And so we teach a series of courses under the College of Medicine to undergraduate students and post-bac students, where we give them the foundation of study design and research ethics all through an emergency medicine lens. And it's this really great symbiotic relationship where they get credit and clinical and research exposure, and then we have this workforce that serves us in the ED to screen and enroll for our active studies. So it's just been a really great thing for our faculty to take part in, and it's built up a lot of interest across campus, which has been really exciting. So that's a great way for some very motivated help. You will end up writing probably 100 letters of support as a result of it, so you get really good at that. But it's a wonderful program, and definitely part of what fills my cup the most in my role. The other part is having a research staff, so paid staff members, a team of research coordinators and project managers who have experience. They can help with some oversight of the Research Associate Program and provide a bit more consistency. These can be funded internally, which would be ideal and wonderful if you have that kind of support, but recognizing that a lot of people don't, they can also be grant funded. In an ideal world, it would be a hybrid of both. And so you would be able to maybe, if you can make a pitch for some support from your department internally, at least for a couple of years, maybe 6 months, a couple of weeks, while you build up some grant funding that will then eventually help support their time. That's the way to go. Other members of the team that are really helpful to have: a grants manager and a biostatistician. They're really going to be key to lifting some of that administrative burden or that really hard math that we're all really scared of and intimidated by. And so some places might use a cost share approach. So for us, we share our grants manager with the Department of Surgery, and it's a 50-50 FTE split. That's a great way to have someone that's on board to help. There are some programs that use, like they harness their PhD graduate programs. So for a biostatistician especially, that's a great approach. I would just be really wary of free help, whether it's you're paying for it financially or you're offering credit. Even with the best intentions, there's always going to be a competing priority at some point, whether it's like a great ski day or a final or a paper that needs to be written. And so I would caution you against any kind of free help there. And so that's your own staff, but then there's a broader infrastructure that comes into creating a research program, and it really comes down to buy-in from your clinical team. And kind of what James was talking about, it requires a culture shift. And that change isn't easy and takes a lot of time. And I tend to talk about starting with the impossible. So I know all our departments are different. They're all unique little snowflakes. But for some reason, we all have that same charge nurse, right? Everyone has one. It's a Mike or a Matt, and they're tall, and they're loud, and they make your interns cry a little bit on their first day. That's the person you need to start with. You need to find who that person is, and you need to make them like you. And so we did just that. We took Matt, and we had him come lecture for our course, and he gave an outstanding lecture on interesting EM cases and one on roles and responsibilities, and then we embarrassed him about it. And we said, look at the great work Matt's doing with our undergrads. He's so wonderful. And we posted a picture of him on our Instagram, and suddenly he has to take some pride in that work and some ownership, and that works. And then others follow suit because everyone's scared of Matt. It's incredibly effective. You should definitely do that. And then we talked about a little bit with sharing the good news, like in a newsletter, and that's really important, but don't forget your clinical staff. And we actually fell into that trap. That was a kind of missed opportunity early on, is that we heard back from our nursing and tech staff that, hey, you were all over us when you needed us for that blood draw or that patient enrollment, but then we never find out what happens next. And so closing that loop, thanks to all your help with enrollment, we have now enrolled this many people in our study, or thanks to your hard work with all those blood draws, here's the paper that resulted from that hard work. And that further closing of the loop just really helps them feel like part of the team and makes them motivated to continue those efforts with you.
Oh, here we go.
Can I say one comment too?
Yeah.
This is very fitting for the sharing with your team. Last week was like National Nurses Week. And so one of the things our division did is we sponsored a lunch in the break room. One is like 11 a.m. for day shift and like 8 p.m. for night shift. And it was like sponsored by Research Division. Thank you so much for all of your work. Oh, by the way, here's our one-page flyer of all the stuff that we're doing as a reminder. They loved it. Like, and it was a couple $100, like paid for by our research fund. And I feel like kind of moves small mountains that were kind of harder to move. So it was really nice to like piggyback off of what is already going on. The hospital is making a big deal of it, and we were able to like contribute some pennies to that. They loved it, and food, more than point.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
Very good comment. Very good. So talk about impossible, and we'll talk about funding. So this can be a real challenge, right? So we all have good ideas. We want to do research. How do you get the money to pay for this? I think one of the things to remember is that nobody started with the big $5 million NIH-funded study. Nobody started with that. And so keep that in mind as you go forward. I would say, get the money you can get, right? So if there are funding opportunities at your institution, I would certainly want to start there. Something local, whether it's in the department, whether it's at your university or an affiliated organization. And keep in mind that successful organizations, successful research divisions will have a diversified portfolio, right? Hopefully. That's the goal, right? And we can see right now with the changes to the indirect costs and so forth that we're experiencing probably a rough patch for NIH funding right now. So the departments who have been well diversified and have a lot of industry sponsorship and other types of resources, nonprofits that are paying for some of the research, are probably doing a little better and a little less scared than the ones who are very heavily dependent on NIH and federal funding. So I think that is a great lesson to learn from this experience, that diversification is important. So not just internal, but also external sources of funding. Nonprofits, I mean, I have to mention that. Literally, I'm at SAEM, so we have a foundation that funds research, and don't forget that. Many people I'm looking at in this room have been funded by that organization, and it's a great way, especially for more junior researchers, to be funded to do research, because these are your peers. These are people that know how important what you're doing is. And so looking at SAM Foundation, EMF, I mean, this is a no-brainer for you if you're looking for a source of funding. And some of us have areas of interest that overlap with other professional organizations like American Heart Association, Society for Critical Care Medicine. There are so many other organizations that are not-profit out there who are looking to give you money, so look for those. Lift every rock, as they say, to try to find that money. Speaking of someone who's been funded by some nonprofits, Mike's next, going to talk about collaboration.
So I don't think I need to justify that collaboration is important in research. We know it's a team sport. What I want to focus on is how we collaborate. Now, I look around the room and I know a lot of you all, and you have really dense networks, and that's not the issue. Like, you have dense networks, but how dense are the networks of your junior faculty? How many of you connected at least one or two new people with your junior faculty while you were here at SAM this past couple of days? How many missed opportunities were there when you were catching up with a friend to introduce them and bring that linkage together? To start hey, let's have coffee and then bring people together to be the matchmaker of research. How many missed opportunities do we have when everyone's here, these amazing leaders in the field, where we all, a lot of them, know each other, and you continue to build collaborations too, but as junior faculty, this is a condensed area where we can really sponsor them into opportunities. So being conscious of that, of not just how do we grow in as a department, but where can we leverage this as an opportunity to help, build those early connections with collaborations? Because that's how I got into research and got into funding. Was one of my first funded studies was because I had people that were smarter than me and that had a better track record than me that helped to bring me up and elevate my game and make my grant better so I could be funded. And I continue to do that as I grow, is that we build in teams of people that bring in unique skill sets. How many of you know every single vice chair in your institution, of every single department? Does anyone know vice chair of dermatology for research? No, but there might be a cool trial that you can be a part of, especially now as we think about how funding gets narrower and narrower. How can we leverage these opportunities? One of the things I've done over the past couple of years as vice chair of research is go out and meet the different vice chairs of research of different departments. And the number of times they're like, I've always wanted to do studies in the ED, but I felt intimidated. I met with rheumatology, and they pitched 2 studies to me with funding because they're like, I don't have a way into the ED population, so I've been doing it in the clinic. It's amazing how often these other departments, they actually want to do stuff with us. They just don't know us. They have no face to it. A blind email is not the same thing as a video chat or going and grabbing coffee for 5 minutes, or all the non-EM services talk for a while. So like 15, 20 minutes. But we talk to them, we catch up with them. And you know who's my best connector in my entire group? It is my research admin. My research admin knows every single other research admin in every single other department and a lot of the surrounding institutions. And I would encourage that if your research admin or your clinical research coordinator, project manager, whoever's kind of like your left-hand person, isn't reaching out and building connections across the institution, you're missing the indirect opportunities. I've gotten 5 different opportunities for studies because my research admin knows a research admin in our Alzheimer's department, who then connected us to geriatric research, who we didn't have a leg or a pathway in before. And so as we launch our geriatric ED, we already have all these things lined up that we wouldn't have otherwise because that indirect connection that came through there. They're a research admin who knew of these things. So I think we need to be leveraging our team to think through not just how do we collaborate, but how do we build those collaborations, how do we build those connections later. I think we also have to be thinking about the fact that people transition, right? People leave institutions. We lose researchers, we lose research staff. That is forever the game. It's just like, Major League Sports. You see people leave teams, and you have to figure out how to fill those spots. We need to be thinking about what are the gaps and what's the transition plan for our junior faculty? Who are going to be the people that can help to build and sustain that junior faculty and that senior faculty piece? For our staff, how are we cross-training them? Are we building those cross-trainable skills? Because I don't have a grants manager right now, but I have a very skilled research admin and now an up-trained clinical research coordinator who can fill those gaps and do those roles. And if I lose someone, everyone on my team has the ability to step up or step laterally or step down to do a different role. My research administrator can actually serve as a CRC and roll bilingually if we have a scenario where we need that, where I lose one of my CRCs. I have the ability to flex up, flex down, but we've cross-trained it. And you know what else? That makes people really enjoy their job because everyone knows they have an upward trajectory. And so I don't lose staff because they see that growth. They're like, oh, I can do that role. How often do we spend that time ourselves to ensure that that's happening, that we're building that trajectory there? And the last thing is, and I know James had touched on this as of others, is when we do those kind of check-ins, like whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever kind of cadence of meetings are, using the time to reevaluate how it aligns with your mission. It's really just easy to say yes to things. There's lots of cool projects, but where does it align with the mission of where you want to grow? And are you still going in that trajectory? Or has your mission shifted from where it may have been 5, 15, 20 years ago when a mission statement was first created? And you say, are we still there now? And reevaluate that and ensure that you're actually going in the same direction.
Disseminate. So if you have a study and you don't disseminate it, did it even happen? So it's really important. It's important, obviously, for promotion, for faculty, but it's also just really important at a basic level for people to know what research you're doing. Because going back to collaboration, if you want collaborators, which we all do, how are they going to know what research you're working on if you don't disseminate it? So opportunities like presenting it at SAEM, publishing it, that is how people know what research you're doing, and they want to work with you if they have that interest. So this is an opportunity, both in emergency medicine, like James said, other areas as well. So if you are interested in, American Heart Association, American Public Health Association, there's opportunities to pull in people into emergency medicine from other disciplines as well. And a lot of this too is, I'm a PhD, so I'm used to rejection, constant rejection. But it is a culture change for clinicians to be rejected. And so it's just kind of getting into this, getting used to the rejection, right? So if you, and this is with funding, of course, as well, you submit to a journal comes back with a revise and resubmit. A lot of people who are not used to that might think, oh my gosh, they hated my manuscript. What do I do? A revise and resubmit is a good thing. And so we have to learn and teach our clinicians that there is a lot of rejection in research. And even if you get something like a revise and resubmit, or a grant is not funded, that's okay. Let's use what they said and let's resubmit the grant. If they are willing to publish it based on after making these changes, like that is okay. So part of it is just kind of like a different culture change for the individual and getting used to that process. And then looking at types of journal articles. So thinking about beyond the full research article. So if this is maybe a pilot study, there's opportunity to publish research briefs or research letters that might be shorter, but still getting your work out there. And there's tools to finding journals, like this Jane search website where you can put in your abstract and they can give you some journal opportunities that might be a good match. And even journal articles that have been published in those journals that might be similar to what you're looking to publish. So there are some good tools to take advantage of. But really dissemination is really important for your research.
I will just anecdote-wise, I have a table on my computer of all of the grants that I've written that are unfunded, which is like thrice as long as like the list that is funded, and I share that with my faculty. I'm like, this is my trajectory. Like, it is okay. It is expected. This is not residency match where you will, it's a one and done thing. And then they see that and like, I still have the Eeyores of my department and I'm like, rah, rah. But I think just literally that visual of like, it's 3 times as many rows, helps them feel better when they're like one little grant doesn't get funded and, we'll keep going. Anyways, okay, so motivate, like I said, rah, rah, shish kumbah. So yes, you really are like going to be their cheerleaders, right? When they're like in their little self-pity party, you have to say like, it is okay. We are a very like division focused department. So the ultrasound people, they are a clique. The toxicology / addiction medicine, they're a clique. So what I really tried to do when I got there was, I hereby declare we're gonna have the first ultrasound research division meeting. And they looked at me like I was crazy. But, I called to order the first one and I said, you guys have all these really good ideas. You're doing a ton of things. Like, let's, again, turn this into something productive. And one faculty member can lead one of these projects, but let's bring on the others as middle authors, middle co-investigators, whatever terminology we want to use. And then the whole division gets brought up in the world, right? And you may have one faculty member who's a lot more research interested, or none of them are, and hopefully but with their combined interests, they can kind of feed off of it. This is where a shared Google Doc, even though we all hate Google Docs for actual writing, is really good because then they all like have something potentially to contribute to, or nothing to contribute to. But anyways, so like leveraging their interests and saying like, okay, let's write more in this field as a group. Like I said, attend their meetings. Like the ultrasound people meet regularly to talk about QI stuff, right? They bring all their like cute little cool ultrasound images and they play their little videos and it's adorable. Well, I am a line item, like, right? It was me, now it's my project manager who's on ultrasound, but we are a line item on their agenda. What research are you doing? We do a round robin of the projects, right? The medical education group, they had a little meeting. And we were a line item where we said, we're gonna talk about what med ed projects you guys are doing, where you've made progress, where you're stalled, and that has really helped. So it really gets to like the culture change, right? Like it's not just QI, like let's talk about research in every single one of these niche fields. Career development, right? We all need this for promotion. For us here at Case Western, are affiliated. It's research, education, and service. I am the only one probably in the last 10 years who put research as their first, one. Everybody else did education and service, fine. But they still need something in those fields, right? So I always kind of remind them of that, like, hey, you do need a paper, at least an abstract, something in those subheadings in order to get promoted, even if research is not your service line, is like not your like primary promotion activity. Discussing it with the chair, one of the things we did was we said that faculty have to have either and the bar was low, but at least it was a bar that was not there before, but it said had to have a paper within 3 years, at one paper every 3 years that they had to either be a co-author on, that they had to be an author on, as a part of their career development. And so again, making research a checkbox for a promotion, even for your like super education focused or your super service focused or operations focused people. It's something that like if you want to be core faculty in our department, that has to be done. So that helped. And honestly, I got no pushback. Like it actually was not awful. I expect to like people to throw things at me on shift, and they did not. They were pretty, it was a good baseline to start with. And then like other people have said, celebrate success. This abstract was presented and accepted. This paper was done. This grant. We even celebrate again when grants are submitted, even if it wasn't awarded. Like you guys pulled yourself together, the EMS folks pulled yourself together, and you submitted this EMF award. It's fine if it wasn't funded. It was a great idea. We're going to look for other opportunities. But like, this is doable. We want to celebrate your success, show other folks that you can do this.
You know, we share like all of these things. Again, I am a standing line item at the faculty meeting every month. Even if I have no news, I will find something to talk about for 10 minutes, unless I absolutely have to get bumped. But I've just made that part of our faculty culture, that research is going to be discussed. And again, I think it goes over really well. Okay, and then learning from your mistakes. Like I said, I share my list of unfunded projects, of unfunded grant applications, just to show like, you know, it can be throwing spaghetti at the wall and just seeing what sticks. And I am also fine with like sharing my like actual like the narrative, right? To show like this is one that got funded, this is one that didn't. Like you have a template, because staring at a blank Word document, if you've never written a grant, is very intimidating. Like this is my timeline table that I've used before. Like all you have to do is insert your specific aims in there, right? This is my Gantt chart, or you know, so like they have that model, and all they have to do is kind of a cut and paste type of job. And then I'll skip down to the last one because I think I've harped on the first two. Things like things that we have encountered in research, like your timelines. Like if your SAMF is a great example, right? This is due August 1st. Like now is definitely the time to start thinking about what you want to write. Like please do not come to me July 15th and expect you're going to get out a completely new piece of work in 2 weeks. Like that is not sustainable with 10 shifts between now and then, right? That's not gonna happen. So I have another table that has, and we're gonna like put this together, that has all of the abstract submission deadlines and now grant submission deadlines to say like, okay, if you're here, let's go back 3 months and say, this is when you need to start thinking about this. So like setting up those timelines, harping on that, it's probably gonna take a full academic year to like really get that to sink in, but that's really important. Giving them a little bit of information about like things like IRB approval, like behind the scenes, our IRB is awful and like you just have to rage and then you move on. It's just a part of the process. But like, you know, just these are the mistakes that we've learned. This is the language that we have seen our IRB really likes, because if you mention, I want to enroll a patient in the ED in pain, they don't understand what that means and they get very feisty. So like this is the language we've learned. If you say these specific complaints, these ESI levels, then that helps to circumvent a lot of their, you know, fairly unknowledgeable critiques of your IRB protocol, because we've just learned what language we need. So share those tips, right? You've learned them, like it's no skin off your back to share them to other folks, particularly if you're in that leadership role. So. Stop there.
All right, so just to summarize everything for you guys before we wrap up here. So the top 7 considerations when building your emergency medicine research program. Culture change starts from the top down. Match talent and strength with your faculty, resident, and student interests with opportunities. Build your research team and infrastructure. Get funding. Collaborate with other people, organizations, both internal and external. Make sure you're disseminating what you're doing. And learn from your mistakes and successes and share those with your team. So we'll go ahead and wrap up and take any questions that you guys might have.
Start. So, Henry Wang from the Ohio State University. This is the, I'm leading the 3rd research program in my career. It definitely feels like you're making it up each time. I was wondering for anybody in the room, does anyone feel like you're on top of your research finances?
I mean, initially no. Thank you. That has been something that's also been like a standing item amongst myself. So I take 2 different approaches. One is I meet with my project managers, I believe monthly, we meet monthly, yeah, they're nodding, to talk about like the state of our finances, what money is coming in, what do we have currently, what do we like if grant X, Y, and Z get funded, what do we project? If they don't get funded, where do we stand? So we have like division finance meetings, and then quarterly I meet with my chair to talk about the state of our research funding, and how we expect that to like look quarter to quarter, so that she can plan accordingly. Roz mentioned that her research coordinators, program managers can be either grant funded or department funded. I have a very mixed bag. Of my 4, I think total like 2.5 FTE are completely grant funded. But that was something I went to my chair and said, like, if you give me 2 to 3 to 4 years, my goal is to get everybody 100% grant funded. And so we check in and say, okay, this is where we're at. Next quarter, this is where we could potentially be. So that's maybe how we do it. I have one project manager who's kind of leads the charge a little bit in finance, but they're all the managers are responsible for their own grants and their own finances. They do the billing, they make sure everybody on the grant gets billed, and that is part of their overall responsibility for that grant, for that division. Is that what you were getting at? Or did I totally miss the ball?
Here, different systems that people set up to maintain an understanding of all the money coming in, going out. For our problem, at 12 funded investigators, 50 staff, it's 10 million of funding every year. It's chaos. It's absolute chaos trying to stay on top of the money.
So, I mean, I'm working as a senior research scientist for Northwell Health, so I currently have 6 or 7 active grants from like 6 different sponsors, and 2 or 3 of them involve like us paying out invoices to other people and then invoicing the sponsor. And one of the challenges that we find is that like even our own HR systems are not set up at all for research. And it's silly things like, the salary allocations are percentages, but what's on our budgets is a dollar amount, right? And the salaries change on a totally different cycle from the funding. So we actually have just like a master spreadsheet. It's 1 line per person per grant, tracking all the salary allocations, and that gets updated monthly because, again, the grants have different periods, especially because they're all different sponsors. And then like the meeting to set it up on our like merit raise increase cycle to redo the allocation percentages based on the dollar amounts, that meeting's already on the calendar and has been there for like 3 months. Because things like, it's very difficult to manage. And it's things like, you do have to track every invoice coming in. So we actually set up like magic buttons so it goes to the right listserv with the right project number to begin with, so that then it's just easier to search to see, okay, like what was paid, like what went into the approval system, when do I need to call accounts payable, to try to stick within those contract windows for like when we can require invoices versus when we then need to turn them around. It's a lot.
Yeah. One potential like stick approach, and this could go over different well or not well at different places, but be like, if there's any budget anybody is submitting, much less receiving, but submitting, it has to go through person X. Like I don't need to like review it per se, but if somebody's submitting a budget for something, I at least want to know that it's being submitted, so I have, again, some conceptual idea of what our department could be getting. So like, for your 12 funded people, and I know one of them is like, anyways, I know several of your people there, and I'm sure they would not love this idea, but like, it is for the greater good of the division department to say like, we just need to know what budgets are floating out there in the world, because you don't want something out there that nobody knows about.
Yeah, so when I took over the vice chair of research role, I inherited a giant pile of numbers that were inconsistent and all over the place, and some of them are outdated, and so we spent the better part of a year and almost 2 years untangling them, and we learned a couple things along the way that may or may not be salient to different people. One is that whatever the institution gives you as their source of truth is almost never accurate. So we create our own source of truth, and we check it against them, and then we correct them and where they're wrong. But we have our own internal documents that do that, so we track it through, and that's our living document. I have a weekly one-to-one with my research admin, and during that, we run that budget every week, but we do a deep dive roughly every 1 to 3 months, depending on where we're on grant cycles. Second thing I do with that one is I do projections. We figure out where our funding drops are anticipated, how it's going to affect our staffing for both our faculty and for our research admins. Are we expecting anything that's in a yellow zone where we're like, this is a high chance of getting defunded? Is that a potential high chance of getting funded? And where are these going to be? So I can start to project some ranges in there. I found that to be really helpful. We track our faculty FTE, and that's actually one of the harder things is getting faculty to respond to things and tell us, hey, actually, oh yeah, you are on that grant with psychiatry. You just forgot to tell us because it's not through our department, it's a shared role. So we forced all our faculty to include us in all those things. And it did take some work, but we've got that in place now. So I know now for one of our addiction medicine specialists who is like 0.1 clinical across almost 7 different grants, of which only 2 are in our department, I know her FTE, and I also know when she's going to drop below that, and we have a risk of her not having clinical hours. Or when we're in a situation where we're seeing that spike, and it's like, okay, so we're going to fill this gap. So we're the backstop of that and making sure those exist in place. So we spent a lot of time kind of building in these different aspects of there. And what that does allow us to do is at least make projections going forward, so I don't have to worry about hiring or losing any research staff, because we can see exactly a 2 to 3 year trajectory for every single person to ensure they're funded.
We need to find the most anal retentive person and make them make an Excel sheet.
Like seriously, who is the best at Excel? Who can do all the formulas? Who is so nitpicky it's obnoxious? And put them in charge of this, because like to the penny, they will make sure this gets done. Yeah.
How do you bend the will of an institution that's primarily clinical, that to understand that research positions exist and are fully funded, and thus even though there may be a hiring freeze for clinical people, that I have money to pay for somebody, let me hire? How do you move that rock from a place that is not a research institution? Oh yeah, come from all these high-power research institutions. My place is I don't really give a crap about research unless we need donors. You know?
Yeah.
Just give up now.
Well, that might be good advice. But at my shop, we have a very schizophrenic approach. So we have a not-profit third-party hirer who hires clinicians, and then we have an academic department with a chair and everybody else. So we have this problem all the time, right? Because the clinical side does not want to hire anybody new, and meanwhile, we're trying to pull in a research team member, right? I think you have to, it's like anything else, you have to learn the language, right? You have to know what it is that they value on the clinical side, this institutional group. What are they looking for? What's important to them? The answer is money. So yeah, I mean, you don't have to really ask. That's the answer. So
It's showing them money. I'm like,
Right.
unpaid invoices for people that should be working on X, Y, or Z. They're
Absolutely.
like, oh, that's great. We'll just take them. I said, no, you can't.
No.
Like, that's not how that works.
So there's some education in there too, right? You have to teach them how this works. But I think ultimately that's the answer, is going to be selling it to them on the terms that they accept as valid, right? So how are they going to make more money somehow by hiring this person? Not the same, but more. How are they going to benefit as a clinical group? I think that's key.
And even more too, like, I could potentially lose this money.
Sure.
Like, I could have to give it back to industry, whether or not, like, your fee would really be held to the fire. Like, you could make the argument that, like, it could be a use it or lose it situation. Like, I would rather go buy a yacht with this money rather than lose this money. So please let me use it in the way I need to use it. Because we have several grants like that. If we don't use it by a certain amount of time, we'll have to give the money back. And so that also helps, because they're like, well, that's silliness. Yeah.
And I would argue that a good portion of that, there's a portion of that that is truly just not understanding, but portion of that is not having their ear. And you can have their ear, but really you want the person who actually has their ear, and you want that person's ear. So it's, where's the holdup? In HR, sometimes it's a person that's in the middle of the chain who's like, oh, I've never seen this before, I have other things to do, and they're blocking it, and therefore you're just not prioritized up. And so how do you get every person along the way to make this path smoother? Where is your hiccup? How do you get that person on board? How do you figure out what is the institutional hiccup in place that's making it seem like it's an insurmountable barrier? And then how you get around it. Because there's always a way around it. It's just people don't necessarily want to pursue that unless they figure out, can I do it? I'm not going to get in trouble. And what do I get out of it? And make sure we make those pitches.
This kind of dysfunction even happens in academic places where it should not happen. Yeah, it just sounds crazy. Knowing your hierarchy and who to pull rank on is very important. Yeah, that's probably just as complex as the funding issue. Yeah.
Any other problems in this chat?
So how do you, I'd like to hear examples of how you manage assigning effort to your big team of 20 research associates who are screening for 20 different trials.
So we have, we've got a team of 10 research coordinators and project managers. All but one of them are grant funded. So we do 95% effort, 90 or higher, mostly 95% effort on the grant. And so we put champions on each grant. So let's pretend we have like 3 different projects. There's STAR, pain, and clotting. And so these coordinators are assigned to STAR. They're the experts. If I have a billing question, if I have an enrollment question, they're my go-to, but everyone's cross-trained. And that's why we reserve that 5 to 10% for other duties as assigned, which everyone hates in their job description, because they can work on a number of different things. But we cross-train everyone on all projects so that, someone's out on maternity leave, someone's out sick, someone gets off the wait list for med school, we're not left scrambled, which just happened. 5 of our 10 are now all off to med school. So I'm panicking a little, but that's how we cover that, is that the cross-training and reserving a portion of their effort that isn't grant funded so that they can cross-train on each other's studies.
I do try to get, I interview them all personally still myself. We're a small enough team, I can still do that. And I like that. I like that part of it. I do try to get a sense of their interests, right? Like I have a couple that are very population health focused, and they love those like really difficult, like challenging public healthy cases, or not cases, projects and grants. So I put them on there. I mean, again, we cross-train everybody. I know it's a lift for the project managers because then they have to train everybody. But like, if it's something that's, like a complex medical home, then I'm gonna put somebody who's really interested on that, versus the one who, as the champion, right? Or something that's maybe a little bit more like scientific, they're gonna go on my cardiac arrest trial because that's more their niche interest. Or somebody who's maybe interested more in pediatrics, if we have something enrolling in the peds ER, I'll make them the champion. And then again, it helps when you write that letter because they showed initiative. No, you showed them, but yes, they showed initiative, and they loved that project and they were, really dug their teeth into it. Is that kind
I
of?
was referring to the financial part.
Oh, okay.
20 studies, some are paid per patient,
Mhm.
okay, and I've got 20 staff. And I need to assign effort on each one. It's fun.
Well, what kind of studies too, because it kind of funding.
Some are NIH or federal, so you can define an effort. Some are what you kill. Mike's nodding his head, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm living that, so I appreciate it. No, I think there's ultimately the federal is the federal, right? You agree to this, you do this, you have to be able to document this. The eat what you kill, what you will, or basically the pay per participant, those are high value things. I can back end those, right? I can fill in gaps and help bridge faculty with that. But I also, and I think that gives you actually quite a bit of flexibility. Like when we've done some of our studies that are pay per participant, I can back calculate and fill in gaps with the 95% and the little bridge room there. But I would also argue that every time we build our team, we have a little bit of capacity for sprint projects. So sometimes it's, I'm going to put a grant, I need a little more prelim data. So we're going to have the capacity in our team to be able to elevate up and be able to sprint to get this data on there. Or there's a new project coming along, and this one, maybe it's a new pay participant model, or there's something else that's like a high alignment with our goals as an institution. Maybe it's aligned with my chair's goals, so I can get things back later. Whatever it is from there, I build that capacity in our team, so there's always a little flex room, because I found, and this is, I know it's aligned, it kind of deviates slightly from your question, but on that piece, I think it's good for us to be conscious of making sure we have slack. If we're working at maximum capacity, 2 things. One, people burn out and they get tired. And that doesn't affect long-term goals, or doesn't help us long-term. But the other thing is that in that capacity, we don't leave ourselves any breathing room, and you need that breathing room, even if it's time just sometimes for to retrain or cross-train or use that. So I always build in a little bit of flex into every role, that there's a time that can be used for something else. Otherwise, if you're actually acting at maximal capacity, you're never going to have the ability to do anything beyond that.
So a trick I pulled at a prior job was to call the research associate team a core service. And I registered with the university, it was very difficult, but it brings a solution that when you have all these various studies with various efforts, it just gets charged to the core service.
Yeah.
I don't have to assign it to a specific person.
Yeah. Well, and what I was gonna say is on our budgets, I just put research coordinator TBD, right? I don't put a name.
Of course.
Because, we know that, but like for the room, so you can just insert human being here,
Make sure, and compliance doesn't understand any of this. They don't understand anything emergency medicine.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I think we're up out of time. Thanks, everybody.